Good day. Welcome to another lecture of Math 21. For today, we will be discussing infinite limits and limits at infinity. So this lecture will be divided into two videos. For this first video, we'll be discussing infinite limits, and then for the second video, we'll discuss limits at infinity. So let's start. Let's consider the function f of x equal to 1 over x squared. So what happens if x approaches 0? Suppose x is 1, f of x or f of 1 is equal to 1. If x is 0.5, f of 0.5, we have 1 over 0.5 squared, that's equal to 4. And so on. If x is 0.0001, then you get this value of f of x. On the other hand, if you approach 0 through negative values, if x is negative 1, f of negative 1 is 1. If x is negative 0.5, f of negative 0.5 is 4, and so on. If you notice, what is happening to the value of f of x as x approaches 0 through positive and through negative values? Right. The value of f of x is increasing. Okay? As x approaches 0 from the right, or as x approaches 0 through positive values, f of x is increasing. And there is no bound to its growth. You can choose values closer to 0, and you expect the value of f of x to be greater. Similarly, as x approaches 0 through negative values, f of x is also increasing indefinitely. Now, this is the graph of the function 1 over x squared. As we have seen earlier, f of 1 is 1, f of 0.5 is 4, and as you move closer and closer to 0, through positive values, the value of f of x increases indefinitely. Similarly, as x approaches 0, or kung palapit sa 0, this time from the left or through negative values, the value of f of x is also increasing indefinitely. So how do we write that mathematically? So we say that the limit of f of x as x approaches a is positive infinity. If the value of f of x increases without bound, whenever the values of x get closer and closer to a. This is our notation for the limit of f of x as x approaches a is equal to positive infinity. Similarly, we can also say that the limit of f of x as x approaches a is negative infinity if the value of f of x this time decreases without bound, or paliit ng paliit yung value ng f of x whenever the values of x get closer and closer to a. And this is our notation, or this is how we write that mathematically. Limit of f of x as x approaches a equals negative infinity. Now, if we go back to the example that or illustration that we looked at earlier, we can now write this. Okay, the limit of 1 over x squared as x approaches 0 is positive infinity. Because as x approaches 0 from the right and from the left, the value of your f of x approaches positive infinity, or it's increasing without bound. Okay, so nakita yung ibig sabihin ng infinite limits. Remember, yung infinity is not a number. So plus or minus infinity are not real numbers. So we say that the limit does not exist kahit na may sagot tayo na positive infinity or negative infinity. Pero mahalaga yung symbol kung positive siya or negative. Okay, kasi nga pag positive siya, it means that the value of the function is increasing without bound. In contrast to when the limit of f of x as x approaches a equals negative infinity, it means that the value of the function is decreasing without bound. Now, we should be able to describe vertical asymptotes. So we say that the line with equation x equals a is a vertical asymptote of the graph of f if at least one of the following is true. Remember, the vertical asymptote is a line. So, you should give an equation of the line. In this case, x equals a. So, that's a vertical asymptote if at least one of the following is true. If you get the limit of f of x as x approaches a from the left, okay, you can either get positive infinity or negative infinity. Other scenarios are when you get the limit of f of x as x approaches a from the right, the limit of f of x is equal to positive infinity or negative infinity. So, if you have either one of these four cases, then we say that x equals a is a vertical asymptote of the graph of f. Let's look at an example. So suppose you have the function f of x equals 3x all over x minus 1. How do we determine the vertical asymptotes of the graph of f? Usually, a possible candidate for vertical asymptote is when the denominator is 0 or when the function is undefined if you have a rational function. So here, we can consider x equals 1. Yan. So, is x equal to 1 a vertical asymptote? So, to prove that it's a vertical asymptote, we just get the limit of the function 3x all over x minus 1 as x approaches 1, say, from the left. Okay? You have already discussed one-sided limits, so I hope ay kaya nyo na itong sagutan. So, you'll get 3 times 1 all over x is, or you're approaching 1 from the left, minus 1. So here you get 3 all over 1 minus 1 is 0. But how are you approaching 0? Remember that this value, or you're approaching 1 from the left, therefore this value is less than 1. Something less than 1, say 0.9 minus 1, you get a negative value. Okay? So 3 over 0 from the left is equal to negative infinity. Okay? Therefore, we have a vertical asymptote at x equals 1. Pero kung gusto nyo makasigurado, sige, let's also get the limit as x approaches 1 from the right. So, limit of 3x over x minus 1. Again, you get 3 times 1 all over 1 from the right, minus 1. So, you get 3 all over 0. This time, x is approaching 1 from the right or through values greater than 1. So, a value greater than 1 minus 1 will be positive. Okay, so this is equal to positive infinity. And we will discuss more or how to solve these limits later. Let me show you the graph of this function. Okay. So this is the graph of f of x equal to 3x all over x minus 1. So in fact, you see that as x approaches 1 from the left, okay, the value of the function is decreasing indefinitely. In contrast, as x approaches 1 from the right, or through values greater than 1, the value of f of x is increasing indefinitely. Okay, so in general, how do we perform these operations or how do you get the limit? Now, let's consider or suppose the limit of f of x as x approaches a is equal to a constant, while the limit of g of x as x approaches a equals 0. And somehow, we know that any constant divided by 0 equals infinity. Okay, but to determine if it's positive or negative infinity, we have to determine how you're approaching 0. So, ito lang yung sinasabi ng theorem na to. So, if the constant is positive and g of x approaches 0 through positive values as x approaches a, so positive yung constant, tapos positive din, you're approaching 0 through positive values, you get a positive value. Or this is equal to positive infinity. Okay? So, tandaan nyo lang yung rules. You don't have to memorize this. Tandaan nyo lang yung rules in dividing signed numbers. Okay? Pero in this case, infinity nga lang yung sagot. Similarly, again, positive yung constant and g of x approaches 0 from the left. So, you have a positive value divided by 0 from the left. Positive divided by negative is negative. Therefore, this is equal to negative infinity. Now, if the constant is negative and g of x approaches 0 from the right as x approaches a, so you have a negative value in the numerator divided by 0 from the right. Negative divided by positive is negative. So this is equal to negative infinity. And then, if c is negative and g of x approaches 0 from the left, negative divided by negative is positive. Therefore, this is equal to positive infinity. Okay? Now, let's evaluate the limit of 5x all over 4 minus x squared as x approaches negative 2. So, if you perform or get the limit as you have studied before, okay, if you substitute negative 2, what you get is negative 10 divided by 4 minus negative 2 squared is 0. Okay? So, negative 10 over 0, that is equal to infinity. A constant over 0 is infinity. Now, we have to determine, is it positive infinity or negative infinity? So, to better see how you're approaching 0, it will be helpful if you get the factors of the denominator. Okay? So, in this case, 4 minus x squared equals 2 minus x times 2 plus x. And we have to get the limit as x approaches negative 2 from the left. And later, we get the limit as x approaches negative 2 from the right. Okay? They may be the same, they may be different. So, we have to check. And limit of 5x all over 2 minus x times 2 plus x. Okay? If it's in factored form, you can easily see the signs. So 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. In the denominator, you have 2 minus negative 2, that's equal to 4. Okay. If it's not 0, you don't have to write you're approaching 4 from the left or from the right. Okay, sa 0 lang yon. Ito, 2 plus negative 2, ito yung 0. So ito yung kailangan yung sabihin or malaman if you're approaching 0 through positive or negative values. Sige, tingnan natin. You're approaching negative 2 from the left or true values less than negative 2. You can choose a number less than negative 2. Yung malapit lang ha. For example, negative 2.1 plus 2, that's negative 0.1. So in general, you'll be approaching 0 through negative values. Okay, so you have negative 10 all over. 4 times 0 is still 0 ha. And then positive times negative is negative. So you're approaching 0 through negative values sa denominator. So sa numerator, you have negative 10. In the denominator, you have 0 through negative values. Negative divided by negative is positive infinity. Okay? Next, we get the limit of 5x all over 2 minus x times 2 plus x as x approaches negative 2 from the right. Okay, so similar to what we did earlier, you get negative 10 all over 2 minus negative 2 is still 4. 2 plus negative 2 is still 0, but this time, you're approaching 0 or you're approaching negative 2 from the right. Okay, or through values greater than negative 2. Say, negative 1.9. So 2 plus negative 1.9, that's 2 minus 1.9, you get a positive value. So here, you'll be approaching 0 through positive values. So this is equal to negative 10 over 0 through positive values. Negative divided by positive is negative. Therefore, this is equal to negative infinity. Okay? So these are the limits. So we say that the limit does not exist kasi we got infinity. Okay? Ano pa yung masasabi natin? We can also say that the function has a vertical asymptote at x equals negative 2. Okay? Now, let's look at some more properties, some more operations. So here, if the limit of f of x exists, so suppose the limit of f of x as x approaches a is c. Okay? And the limit of g of x as x approaches a is positive infinity. Okay. What will be the limit of the sum of f and g as x approaches a? Okay? Diba? You can get the limit, pwede nyo i-distribute yung limit, you can get the limit of each function as x approaches a. So here, you get c plus infinity. But a constant plus a very big number, or infinity, that's equal to positive infinity. Okay. Second case, so this is equal to positive infinity. On the other hand, if the limit of g of x as x approaches a is negative infinity, so you get c plus negative infinity. So a constant plus a very small number, you get a very small number, or negative infinity. So, yun yun. So if the limit of g of x as x approaches a is plus or minus infinity, then the limit of the sum of f and g as x approaches a is plus or minus infinity. Okay? Now, for the difference, ganun din. The limit of f as x approaches a is c. This time, we subtract positive infinity. Okay? C minus a very large number, you get negative infinity. Okay? Now, if the limit of g of x as x approaches a is negative infinity, what happens? So you get c minus negative infinity minus minus, so that becomes a constant plus infinity, which is equal to positive infinity. So, ito baliktad, minus plus infinity. Okay? Now, in the next cases, what do we have? This time, the limit of f of x as x approaches a is positive infinity. The limit of g of x as x approaches a is positive infinity. So you have positive infinity plus positive infinity. That should be equal to positive infinity. Now, if the limit of g of x as x approaches a is negative infinity, what do you have? You have positive infinity minus infinity. Okay? What is that equal to? Which infinity is greater? This infinity or this infinity? If this infinity is greater, magiging positive infinity yan. If this infinity is greater, this should be equal to negative infinity. But which infinity is greater? Iwan muna natin to. Sasagutin natin siya mamaya. Okay? Next, go to subtraction. Yan. So, if you look at this case, what do you get? Positive infinity minus positive infinity. Diba? Parang same, pareho nito. Infinity minus infinity. So, ayaw muna nating sagutin yan. Question mark muna. Okay? And then yung last case, you have positive infinity minus infinity, minus infinity. So that's positive infinity plus positive infinity. Therefore, ito sure tayo na equal yan sa positive infinity. Okay? Ito, other operations, this time multiplication naman. Ha? Yan. So suppose you have a constant which is a real number not equal to 0. So suppose the limit of f of x is equal to that constant and the limit of g of x equals plus or minus infinity. Okay? So, ito yung, suppose the constant is positive. So, ang limit ng f of x times g of x, if the constant is positive, so use the rules in multiplying signed numbers. Though hindi talaga real number yung infinity, pero applicable pa rin yun dito. Positive times positive is positive. Positive times negative is negative. So, yung limit ng product is equal to plus or minus infinity. Okay? Kung negative yung limit ng g of x as x approaches a, positive times negative is negative infinity. Okay. Now, if the constant is negative, so negative times plus or minus infinity, marireverse yung sign. Kasi something negative times positive equals negative. So you get negative infinity. And then something negative times negative, that's positive infinity. So this is equal to negative or positive infinity. Okay. Next, if the limit of f of x as x approaches a is positive infinity, similarly, the limit of g of x as x approaches a is positive infinity. So infinity times infinity is just infinity. And since they are both positive, this should be equal to positive infinity. Sorry, naligaw yung period. Next, you have limit of f of x as x approaches a is positive infinity. Okay, times the limit of g of x as x approaches a, which is negative infinity. Positive times negative is negative infinity. And then last, what if the limit of f of x as x approaches a is 0? And the limit of g of x as x approaches a is plus or minus infinity. Ano yung sagot nun? What is 0 times plus or minus infinity? Remember, limit to ha. Hindi ito exactly 0. These are limits. So, pwedeng hindi siya exactly 0. Pwedeng 0.00001 times a very big number. Okay? Sino yung parang mananalo? Mapapaliit ba itong infinity? Or mapapalaki itong 0.00 something? Yan. So, ito yung isang bagay ulit na hindi tayo sigurado. So, hindi muna natin sasagutin ngayon. Okay? So, let's try to look at some examples. First, we want to get the limit of x squared minus 2 all over x minus 1 as x approaches 1 from the left. Okay? So, di ba, may theorem tayo that you can get the limit of each of the addends or each of the terms. Kunin natin. So, get the limit of x squared para mas clear. Pero pag sanay na kayo, pwede nang i-diretso. So, get the limit of x squared as x approaches 1 from the left. Also, get the limit of 2 all over x minus 1 as x approaches 1 from the left. Okay, ano yung limit ng x squared as x approaches 1 from the left? So, 1 squared is just equal to positive 1. Now, limit of 2 all over x minus 1 as x approaches 1 from the left, you have 2 all over 0. Okay, eto. So, kailangan natin, since 0 yung denominator, kailangan nating malaman how you are approaching 0. Okay, you're approaching 1 through the left, or you're approaching 1 from the left through values less than 1, say 0.9. Okay, so pag less than 1 to, then you subtracted 1. Okay, what you get as a difference is a negative value. Agree? Therefore, this should be equal to negative infinity. Okay, substituting those values, so get the limit as x approaches 1 from the left of x squared minus 2 over x minus 1. But you have limit of x squared as x approaches 1 is 1 minus negative infinity. Okay, so this is minus minus, magiging 1 plus infinity. So 1 plus a very big number, parang halos negligible na lang yung 1. So this will be equal to positive infinity. Okay. Next example, we want to get the limit of 1 over x squared minus 9 plus 2x over x plus 3 as x approaches 3 from the left. Okay, so if you substitute yung negative 3, initially, sige, para may idea lang tayo, you get 1 over negative 3 square is 9, minus 9, 0. Okay, ito, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 over negative 3 plus 3, 0 pa rin. Yan, sige. So, we expect to get infinity. Pero dapat nga, clear tayo sa sign ng infinity, kung plus or minus siya. So, let's look at the details. Let's get the limit of each term. So, yung 1 over x squared minus 9, yun nga, mas maganda na i-factor natin siya as x minus 3 times x plus 3. Okay? Then, evaluating, you get 1 over negative 3. Negative 3 minus 3 is negative 6. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0. Then, let's check how are you approaching 0. So, negative 3 from the left to, something less than negative 3, say negative 3.1 plus 3. That will give you a negative value. Okay, so what you have is 1 over 6, negative 6 times 0, 0 pa rin yan, ha? But how will you be approaching 0? Since negative to, tapos you're approaching 0 through negative values, you'll be approaching 0 from the right. So this is equal to positive infinity. On the other hand, getting the limit of 2x all over x plus 3, as x approaches negative 3 from the left, so you have 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 all over 0. And you'll be approaching 0 from the left. Okay? Negative divided by negative is positive. Tapos you have 0 in the denominator, so this is positive infinity. Then, summarizing, so the limit as x approaches negative 3 from the left of 1 all over x squared minus 9 plus 2x over x plus 3 is equal to positive infinity plus positive infinity. So we're sure that this is equal to positive infinity. Remember, ito yung mga questions natin kanina. We call these indeterminate forms, katulad ng mga indeterminate forms na na-discuss nyo earlier or in the previous lectures. So, we have these indeterminate forms, yung infinity minus infinity, and 0 times infinity. Remember, pag indeterminate form, you have to do something more. So, let's see ano yung mga pwedeng gawin if you encounter these indeterminate forms. For example, you want to get the limit of 3 over x minus 2 minus 2x all over x squared minus 4 as x approaches 2 from the right. Okay, sige. So, initially, pwede na bang... Okay, I'll not show the details, yung pagkuha ng limit sa bawat term. Okay lang, idiretso ko na as one expression here. Okay, so if x is approaching 2 from the right, 2 minus 2 is 0. Okay, ko na dito ha. 3 all over 0. But you're approaching 2 from the right, so the difference will approach 0 from the right. Yan. So for example, x is 2.1, 2.1 minus 2 is positive 0.1. Dito naman, 2 times 2, you have 4 over 2 squared minus 4 is 0. Yan, pero sige na nga, mukhang kailangan na i-factor natin para mas makita nyo. Limit of 2x all over x minus 2 times x plus 2 as x approaches 2 from the right. Okay, so sa numerator, 2 times 2 is 4. Sa denominator, 2 minus 2 is 0. And then 2 plus 2 is also 4. Okay, ito, we have to determine how you are approaching 0. Since your x is approaching 2 from the right or through values greater than 2, so you'll be approaching 0 from the right. Therefore, you have 4 over 0 from the right, or that is equal to positive infinity. Or sige, dito na lang. Okay? So what you have here is the indeterminate form infinity minus infinity. Yan. So, ibig sabihin ng indeterminate form, hindi pa yan yung final answer. So, we have to do something. Ano yung pwede natin gawin? We can, erase ko na to. We can write this as one fraction. Okay, ang LCD natin ay x minus 2 times x plus 2. Okay, so the first fraction is equivalent to 3 times the quantity x plus 2, or that is 3x plus 6 minus 2x. So this is equal to the limit of 3x minus 2x. You have x plus 6 all over x minus 2 times x plus 2. We're still getting the limit as x approaches 2 from the right. So substituting, what do you have? X plus 6 or 2 plus 6 is 8 divided by, sige, unahin ko na itong 4, and here you have 0. Again, if x is approaching 2 from the right, x minus 2 will be approaching 0 from the right. Okay, so ito medyo mas clear na. You have 8 divided by 0 times 4 is still 0. You're approaching 0 through positive values. And we know that this is equal to positive infinity. Okay? Next, we want to evaluate the limit of this function as t approaches 4 from the right. Okay? Sige, substituting. Sige, try muna natin. If you substitute or evaluate, when t equals 4, you get 1 over 0 from the left. Okay, times, tama, kasi yung t nyo is approaching 4 from the right, or a value greater than 4. So if you subtract that from 4, magiging negative. And then here we have t over t minus 1, so 4 all over 3 minus 8 over 4 plus 2 is 6. Okay, so 1 over 0 from the left is negative infinity. While 4/3 minus 8/6, take note, ano sila? These are equivalent fractions. If you simplify yung 8 over 6, diba, you can write this also as 4 over 3. So this is infinity times 0. Okay, so be careful. Infinity times 0 is not equal to 0. It's an indeterminate form. So let's see what can we do to find the limit or to evaluate the limit. Sige, try natin. Yung katulad ng ginawa natin kanina, if we write this as one fraction. Okay, so you get limit as t approaches 4 from the right of 1 all over 4 minus t times, sige, so the LCD is t minus 1 times t plus 2. Okay, then getting the equivalent fraction, you get t squared plus 2t minus 8t plus 8. Okay? Pa-verify na lang ha. So, you multiply negative 8 by t minus 1. That's why you get negative 8t, negative plus 8. Okay? So, you get limit as t approaches 4 from the right. You have 1 all over 4 minus t. In the numerator, you have t squared minus 6t plus 8 all over t minus 1 times t plus 2. Okay, we can factor out the numerator. Any factors niyan? You have t minus 4 times t minus 2 all over t minus 1 times t plus 2. Okay? Now, you cancel out the common factors. Okay, magka-cancel out. Ay, sorry. Ano yung magka-cancel? Ito pala ay t plus 2. This is t minus 2. So, ang magka-cancel lang ito, t minus 4 and 4 minus t. And then you have a factor -1. Okay, so you get limit as t approaches 4 from the right of negative or 2 minus t. Negative of t minus 2 can be written as 2 minus t all over t minus 1 times t plus 2. Okay, now let's get the limit as t approaches 4 from the right. 2 minus 4 is -2. 4 minus 1 is 3. 4 plus 2 is 6. Okay, so you have -2 and 6 can be divided by 2. So you have -1 all over 9. Yan. So to check if you understood our lesson for today, yung first part pa lang to ng lesson, you can try to work on these exercises.